Hi, Auntie Lindsay here. Welcome back. There's a lot going on here in America, and 2020 certainly has not been the best year for anyone across the entire world. But especially here in America, where we now have some really big issues that we need to face. And I kind of want to talk about things. So if you're easily triggered by things, please click off, because I'm not one to sugarcoat things. I'm very direct, and I just kind of tell it like it is. And my life has not exactly been sunshine and rainbows. So yeah, I don't sugarcoat things. So please click off if you're easily triggered. With that said, racism is a very deep-rooted issue here in America. I think I was lucky enough to kind of see racism at first hand when I was very young, whether I realized it or not. I've been thinking a lot about it lately. And you know, when I was young, well, my grandparents immigrated here from England in the 1950s. And by the time I was born in the 70s, they had both divorced and remarried. My grandmother had remarried to a gentleman from Pennsylvania who later ended up committing suicide when I was 10, but that's a different story. And my grandfather remarried to a black lady from Mississippi. And I never really thought much of it, because to me she was Grandma Helen, and she was always Grandma Helen. That's just who I knew. But you know, my grandfather, being a blonde hair, blue eyes Englishman with a black woman, I noticed comments here and there and side glances and stuff, but I never really quite comprehended because I was just too young and naive. And certainly there were a lot of things said about them within my own family, especially, you know, my own mother and one of my brothers, the one that's closest to my age. I have 3 younger brothers, technically all half brothers, because we all have different dads, and their dads are brothers. But anyways, so the one closest to age is 5 years younger. He grew up quite angry and kind of hate the world kind of guy, and a lot of it was validated. But I do remember him dropping the N-word and all sorts of stuff, talking about situations with Grandma Helen, and I think that a lot of that also came from my mother, because she was angry that someone else married her father, and she was basically protecting her mother. But a lot of unnecessary things were said, and I just viewed them as my grandparents. And I remember, like, I would go to church with them, to Grandma Helen's church, a Southern Baptist church in Seattle. And me and my grandfather would be the only whites in church. But I didn't really bother me. I thought it was very safe, and I had a lot of fun, because if you've ever been to like a Southern Baptist church, it's very upbeat, a lot of energy, very passionate when they preach, and their singing is just, there's nothing like it. And I'm sure that comes from a lot of oppression and pain, but they're so full of just life. And I just remember like sitting there coloring and counting all the hats and listening to them, because they wore some beautiful hats and just got very dressed up. And they called each other brother and sister, which I thought was cool. No other church that I had ever been to ever called each other brother and sister. I remember going to Sunday school in the basement of that church and seeing a painting on the wall of Jesus, but it was a black Jesus. And so naturally I thought Jesus was black. I mean, why would I question it? It wasn't until later when I started going to different churches with my friends, because I was kind of just feeling things out, seeing where I stood, and I would see their what they thought Jesus was blonde hair, blue eyes, and I'm like, all right, never quite understood that. But also, if you ever go to like mostly all white church, it's kind of boring. They're not really, I mean, it's kind of the opposite of a Southern Baptist church. I know Eddie Izzard does this like skit where he's talking about the hymns, and it's like na 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 na. It's kind of what it sounds like. It's horrible. But anyways, yeah. So I don't know, through my different experiences with them, I just thought that was pretty cool. And Grandma Helen had children from a previous marriage, and had grandchildren, and that were around my age. I remember one year going to school with one of her grandsons who, I think I remember what elementary school. I went to a lot of different elementary schools because my mom was very young and very irresponsible. So we would move around a lot, sometimes like a couple times to 4 times a year. But one particular year, I remember I was told not to say that we were related in any sort of way, or I couldn't play with him at recess. And I didn't quite understand because I was naive. But I do understand kind of now as I look back, some of the comments that were made about all the grandchildren and their mother, because they were very dark skinned and their last name was Roach. So there's just a lot of unnecessary things that were said. But I don't know, it's just, I was lucky enough to have those experiences that my brothers did not, because they came along much later. But also thinking about, people within my own family, kind of the negative things that they would say and racist things that they would say. And I'm not blaming anyone, because everyone, no matter what color skin you have, what background, what culture, all of us have been racist at one time or another. None of us are completely innocent, because whether we learned it from our parents or the people around us, or just scared of other cultures or whatever, everyone has been racist, right? I mean, I value traveling all over the world when I had the chance, and meeting different cultures and people, and a lot of my friends are not from the US. I certainly don't date men that are from this area. Probably because a lot of traumas in my life with American white men. Plain and simple. I don't know where I was going with that, but I just think of a lot of things that maybe white privilege came to play in my life, and I've never really quite understood until recently what white privilege meant, because I'm certainly not privileged. I've had a pretty rough life, but I was just looking at that word privilege and not putting the two together, because the color of my skin has never been an issue for me, and I recognize that now. But I also think about things that have happened in my life where white privilege came into play. And maybe it started at birth. I was born to a mother who was barely 18 and really knew nothing about raising children or anything. And I talk about this, there's a video of me speaking like in 2018 with the family court reform at Washington State Capitol in Olympia, when my 16-year-old niece went missing and was taken by a 47-year-old man. That's another whole white privilege thing. But my mother did not take care of me because she wanted to go out and have fun with her friends and be an 18-year-old. And I was so badly malnutrition that I ended up in the hospital for a couple months. And from what my grandfather had said, they didn't think I would be able to walk just because of that. But I was placed into foster care, which was created the year before I was born, and then later placed within a family relative. There's a butterfly. Sorry, easily distracted. And I was thinking, eventually my grandmother took my mother aside and said, you need to get your daughter back. And I was eventually placed back with my mother. And then from what my brother's aunt had told me, she would babysit me. This was before my brothers came along. She would babysit me while my mom went to jail on the weekends. And which seems kind of odd to me. Why would someone just go to jail on the weekends? But probably because of white privilege, and they were trying to work with my mother. And I don't know if it was because of what happened with me or with another incident that she got in trouble for. I think she has like a misdemeanor or a felony, I'm not quite sure. Something that's not talked about, but I think if the color of her skin and the color of my skin was different, my story of my life would be completely different, because I probably would have got lost in the system, like a lot of black children are lost in foster care. Because a little bit about me too, I've volunteered with Stand Up for Kids with the homeless youth for the last 10 years on the streets of Seattle. So I recognize all the issues with homelessness within the youth, and a big part of that is foster care, and that blacks are 3 times more likely to be homeless than the rest of the population. So that's why I said that. So yeah, in a way, I'm lucky that I did have white privilege since birth. But I don't know. And also thinking about my brother, who's the one brother that's closest in age, him just so angry, and he has a very racist tattoos on his arm, and the things that he would say in the N-word that he would drop all the time. I don't talk to him anymore. There's a lot of issues, especially what's had happened in the last couple years. I've had to block him. But he's not one I would talk to about racism, because he's so full of rage. I mean, he was the kid that got kicked out of high school because some kid pissed him off and he threw him through a window and almost killed him. And he got sent to juvie and got kicked out of the school district. But if he was a different color skin, I'm very certain that he would probably be tried as an adult. I don't know. I think a lot about that, and I think about things that he taught his daughters or said to his daughters, because they would come visit me in Seattle, because they lived about 40-50 minutes away from me, and they would be like scared to go into the city at first with me because of what they heard their father say about different races, and just installing fear in them. And so as an aunt, I took them into the city and showed them around and introduced them to people that I knew on the street. Because of my volunteer work, I would introduce them to the homeless kids that I knew. Because number one, I didn't want them to end up homeless, because I knew kind of that's where they were going if things didn't turn around, or because my brother was, self-medicating and just had a lot of trouble within himself, and I just kind of knew what direction that was going to end up. And so I really didn't want them to end up on the street. And so I would have them talk to other kids out there and just let them know that you shouldn't fear people just by the color of their skin or because they're different in any sort of way. And that was very important to me to teach them that. Whether that worked or not, I don't know, just because of the events that happened. Like, for instance, as I talk about, my niece that went missing, if I would have told authorities, CPS, police, that a black man had taken my niece. A 47-year-old black man had taken my niece, or any color besides white. I think I would have gotten a much better response than what I did. Instead, I got a lot of horrible comments by people, by strangers, by people I know and love, by friends, you know, that I've certainly lost because of that incident, because I never gave up. I pushed and pushed and kept finding her. But if that man that took her, if he was a person of color, he probably would have been arrested the first time we found her. And he certainly would have been arrested at least the second time we found her, when he took her across multiple state lines and found her in Tennessee. They probably would have arrested him instead of throwing her in jail for the weekend. Even then, if the third time we found her in Arizona, again, taking her across multiple state lines, he wouldn't have just gotten 3 months in jail. And he was found with another minor just prior to her being found. So he only got 3 months in jail, and he got 3 years of probation in Arizona. But because I'm sure the color of his skin, and he got off pretty easy. If he was a person of color, that wouldn't have happened at all. So that's definitely a good example of white privilege right there. And I also think about some things that have happened to me personally. I mean, it's a long list, but especially like in college, I think about that. My rapist, if he was a person of color, he probably would have gotten a lot more severe charge than just getting suspended from school, because he was the president of his fraternity, and God forbid that I ruin his whole university experience. And I got certainly bullied for that. Basically, people trying to get me off campus, but secretly sorority girls were coming to me in secret and telling me that the exact same thing happened to them by him. So I know for a fact that was definitely white privilege. Little lizard. Yeah, because he was blonde hair, kind of attractive guy from Texas, president of his fraternity, and he got off pretty easy, honestly, because I had a lot of evidence against him, but it didn't matter. Anyways, I just think about these injustices, and I don't even begin to know what it's like to be someone of color. I just know from what I've, seen in my life, examples, and thanks to, me traveling and getting to know people of different cultures and from all over the world, it's certainly opened my eyes to what people struggle with, and it's not, just solely me and whatever. But also, I think about, like, my grandmother, for instance, who was 100% Ashkenazi Jewish, and all the struggles that her family went through, especially the ones that immigrated from Russia and Latvia to England, because they were getting pushed from their homes and murdered and all sorts of horrible things. And, as Ashkenazi Jewish, at one time, they outnumbered the Sephardic Jews. I think it was 75% Ashkenazi and 25% Sephardic. I hope I said that right. I think that was in the Middle Ages, but after the Holocaust, it dwindled down quite a bit. I think it was 97 Sephardic and 3% Ashkenazi Jewish. So now there's much more of Ashkenazi Jews in the world. But just to think about that time, like when I was a kid, when a lot of things were going on at home, my safe place was the library. And I would go, like 5th, 6th grade especially, I remember. It was really bad, and I would go to the library and I would get books on the Holocaust and runaway kids and stuff, but I was especially on the Holocaust, and that's pretty dark reading for a 5th, 6th grader. But for some reason I was drawn to that. I wanted to read about people that were in worse situations than I was, because I was always visualizing when I was very little, like when I turn 18, I can have a better life. I can get out of here. You know, I can do such and such and such. I can travel. I can do this. So I wanted to read about injustices about other people at a very early age. Plus, if something spoke to me to read about that, because I think it was, not to sound crazy, but it was my ancestors telling me this is what we went through, and it's very important that you know. So I think about that a lot, and about my ancestors and what experiences they went through, and it definitely humbles me. Even though I haven't had an easy life, it could be so much worse just based on certain things. So I think it's important that everyone just kind of looks at themselves and reflects and takes some time alone, take a deep breath, and think about what you need to heal within yourself. Because we all need to take part as a nation to heal our family lines. It's up to us. Because we can't have this go on for another 50 years, another 100 years, another 400 years. We just can't. I mean, we're gonna destroy ourselves. I mean, essentially, America is at war with itself. Because this is, yes, it's political, but it's really not about politics, it's about humanity. And so we need to just heal. We all need healing. So I encourage people to kind of look within themselves and think about changes that they can make and what they can improve and what they can learn, because it's really about educating yourself and healing yourself. So yeah, please, as a nation, we need to do better, America. We just need to do better, and we need to heal, please. So that's my thoughts for today. I know I can go on and talk about different experiences in my life, and I will definitely save those for other videos. I don't want to scare too many people away. But, you know, I just have a different view on things just because of what I've been through. And it certainly has not been easy, but I have been very lucky because, look at me. I'm just completely honest. Yeah. So look at yourself, take a deep breath, and say, how can I do better? How can I do better for America, for my country? Because the rest of the world is watching us. We need to lead by example.